Leave with nothing but your name. Because one day the truth will return wearing a crown no one can deny." The words echoed through the stone courtyard just as the blood moon climbed above Silver Ridge, painting every rooftop in crimson light. Evelyn Carter stood alone before the gathered pack, her hands trembling from the cold more than from fear. Every familiar face she had trusted since childhood stared back with disappointment, suspicion, or silence. No one stepped forward. No one questioned the accusations whispered against her. The elders had already decided that a weak Omega who brought misfortune wherever she walked could no longer remain among them. Their judgment fell heavier than the winter air surrounding the ancient square. Even the wolves hidden inside every heart seemed to hold their breath. Evelyn searched the crowd one final time, hoping to find a single pair of eyes willing to believe her, but every gaze slipped away before meeting hers. The alpha who ruled the pack rose from his carved seat, his expression unreadable beneath the silver glow of the moon. His voice carried across the courtyard with calm authority. "You are banished from Silver Ridge. Leave before sunrise and never return." The words landed with quiet finality. Evelyn wanted to defend herself, to explain that she had committed no betrayal, that every rumor had been carefully planted by someone who feared what they did not understand. But the truth had no place inside a room that had already chosen its ending. She lowered her head instead, swallowing the ache rising inside her chest. As she turned toward the forest path, a cold wind wrapped around her worn cloak, carrying away the only home she had ever known. Behind her, the heavy gates closed with a deep echo that sounded like the last page of an old life. She walked without looking back, following a narrow trail buried beneath fresh snow until the lights of the village disappeared behind towering pines. Every step became harder as exhaustion settled into her body. She blamed it on the long night, never realizing another heartbeat had already begun beneath her own. Far above, clouds drifted away from the moon, and a pale silver beam slipped through the branches, resting gently across Evelyn's stomach. She stopped, confused by the unexpected warmth spreading through the bitter cold. Beneath the fabric of her dress, a delicate crescent-shaped mark shimmered for only a moment before fading like morning mist. She touched the place with uncertain fingers, wondering if grief had begun to play tricks on her mind. Somewhere deeper in the forest, an old wolf lifted its voice toward the moon, not with menace but with recognition. The sound lingered between the trees as if answering a promise written long before Evelyn had taken her first breath. Her knees weakened, and she stumbled through the snow until she reached the base of a weathered oak. The world blurred around her. Just before darkness claimed her vision, she noticed a tall figure emerging from the drifting snowfall, carrying a lantern whose warm golden light refused to surrender to the freezing wind. The stranger knelt beside her with gentle eyes filled not with judgment, but quiet understanding, while above them the blood moon disappeared behind the clouds, hiding the first secret of a destiny that would one day shake an entire kingdom. When Evelyn opened her eyes, she expected to find ice beneath her hands and snow falling across her face, but instead she saw a ceiling woven from warm cedar beams, softly lit by the gentle glow of a stone fireplace. The air smelled of pine, fresh herbs, and warm bread instead of frozen earth. For several quiet moments, she simply listened to the crackling fire, wondering if she had crossed into a dream between one heartbeat and the next. Then she heard slow footsteps approaching. The man she had seen through the snowstorm stepped into view carrying a steaming mug. His silver hair framed a weathered face marked not by hardship alone, but by years of quiet wisdom. He offered the cup with a calm smile that expected nothing in return. "Drink slowly," he said. "Your body has endured more than the cold." Evelyn accepted the warm herbal tea, surprised by the kindness in the stranger's voice. She had almost forgotten what kindness sounded like. "My name is Rowan Hale," the old man continued. "People once called me a healer. Now they simply call me an old man who prefers the mountains." Evelyn lowered her eyes. "You should not have troubled yourself for someone like me." Rowan gently shook his head. "Every life is worth troubling yourself for." The simple answer settled over the cabin more deeply than the silence. For the first time since leaving Silver Ridge, Evelyn felt the tightness around her heart loosen ever so slightly. Over the following days, the snow continued to blanket the valley outside while Rowan quietly cared for her without asking about the accusations, the trial, or the pack that had abandoned her. He never demanded explanations. Instead, he watched carefully, as though listening to something beyond ordinary words. On the 7th morning, he asked Evelyn to place her hand over his. His expression remained thoughtful as he closed his eyes. A faint warmth spread between their palms, followed by an unmistakable smile. "The moon has entrusted you with a remarkable future," he said softly. Evelyn looked at him with confusion. "I do not understand." Rowan opened his eyes, their gentle brightness filled with certainty. "You are going to be a mother." Evelyn felt the room become perfectly still. The words echoed inside her heart before she could fully believe them. Tears gathered in her eyes, not from sadness alone, but from the overwhelming realization that she was no longer completely alone in the world. Her hands instinctively rested against her stomach as countless emotions rose together. Fear, hope, wonder. Then Rowan's peaceful smile slowly widened. "There is something even more extraordinary." Evelyn searched his face, afraid to breathe. "You are not carrying one child." Her heartbeat quickened. "Not two." The silence stretched another moment. "Not three." Evelyn's eyes grew wider with every word. Rowan finally whispered, almost in reverence, "There are 5 young lives growing together beneath your heart." She stared at him in disbelief, unable to speak. 5. The number felt impossible. Rowan stood and walked toward the small window where sunlight reflected across untouched snow. "I have spent more than 50 years studying the old blessings left by the moon goddess," he said quietly. "I have never witnessed 5 alpha spirits awakening before birth." Evelyn looked down again, her fingers trembling gently against her stomach. At that very moment, she felt the faintest flutter beneath her palm, so delicate that it could have been mistaken for imagination. Yet it came again, followed by another, until 5 tiny rhythms seemed to answer one another like distant stars beginning to shine across the same evening sky. Rowan turned back toward her, his voice filled with quiet certainty. "The world believes it has cast away its weakest omega." He paused before adding words that neither of them would ever forget. "It has no idea it has also cast away its future." 10 years passed as quietly as snow settling across the hidden valley, and the lonely cabin that had once sheltered a frightened young woman slowly became a home filled with laughter, footsteps, and endless wonder. Every sunrise began with 5 eager voices racing outside before breakfast, filling the mountain air with joyful energy that echoed through the towering pines. Rowan often stood on the porch with a patient smile, watching the boys disappear into the forest before shaking his head in amazement. He had delivered countless children during his years as a healer, yet he had never seen anything like them. Ethan, the oldest by only a few minutes, carried himself with calm confidence that naturally drew his brothers together whenever they disagreed. Noah possessed remarkable wisdom, always noticing details others overlooked, often predicting storms long before dark clouds appeared above the mountains. Lucas could comfort frightened animals with a single gentle touch, and injured creatures somehow trusted him without hesitation. Mason was fearless, climbing rocky cliffs and towering trees with effortless grace, while Caleb, the youngest, laughed more than anyone and somehow brought peace whenever tempers threatened to rise. Although each child displayed gifts beyond their years, Evelyn never allowed pride to become the center of their lives. Every evening, after supper, she gathered them beside the fireplace where Rowan quietly listened. From his favorite chair, she never spoke about revenge or the pack that had abandoned her. Instead, she repeated the same lesson until every word became part of their hearts. Real strength protects. It never humiliates. Real leaders lift others before they lift themselves. The boys listened carefully, their bright eyes reflecting the dancing firelight. They asked many questions about courage, kindness, forgiveness, and honor, but Evelyn answered each one with patience rather than anger. She wanted them to grow into men whose character would always speak louder than their power. As the years passed, strange moments became impossible to ignore. Wild wolves often appeared near the cabin without fear, quietly watching the children before disappearing back into the trees. Eagles circled overhead whenever the brothers explored the highest ridges. Even powerful mountain bears calmly stepped aside, instead of challenging them along narrow trails. Rowan observed everything in thoughtful silence, his old journals slowly filling with careful notes. One crisp autumn afternoon, he watched Ethan split a fallen log with a single clean strike despite using an ordinary practice axe sized for a young teenager. Another morning, Noah correctly described a traveler arriving nearly an hour before the distant horse became visible along the mountain pass. Lucas healed a wounded deer so gently that the frightened animal remained beside him until sunset. Mason outran every hunting dog from nearby villages during a friendly harvest festival, while Caleb somehow convinced two feuding merchants to settle a bitter disagreement simply by speaking honestly from his heart. Rowan finally closed his notebook with a slow breath. "The alpha spirits are awakening," he whispered to himself. Evelyn heard the words, but said nothing. Deep inside, she had sensed the change for months. One evening, as golden sunlight faded beyond the western peaks, all five brothers stood together overlooking the valley. Without warning, a cool breeze swept across the mountaintop, carrying the scent of distant forests far beyond the mountains they had always called home. Ethan looked toward the horizon with quiet curiosity. "Mother," he asked softly, "why does it feel like someone is waiting for us?" Evelyn followed his gaze toward the endless wilderness where the last rays of daylight disappeared beyond unseen kingdoms. A feeling she had buried for 10 long years quietly returned to her heart. Somewhere beyond those distant hills, the past had begun searching for the future, and neither one knew that their paths were already moving toward the same inevitable destination. The first sign that the outside world had changed arrived with a traveler whose horse could barely continue along the mountain trail. Rowan welcomed the exhausted stranger inside without asking for payment, offering warm soup and a place beside the fire. While the man rested, the five brothers quietly repaired the broken harness and gathered fresh water for the horse before anyone asked them to help. The traveler watched them with genuine surprise. "You have remarkable sons," he finally said to Evelyn. She smiled softly without answering. Compliments had never been what mattered to her. After finishing his meal, the traveler unfolded a worn map across the wooden table. His finger rested on the northern territories where several villages had been carefully marked. "The kingdom is changing," he said with concern. "Several alpha packs have fallen into confusion. Old alliances are breaking apart. Trade routes have become unsafe, and many families have left their homes searching for peace." Rowan exchanged a thoughtful glance with Evelyn. "What happened?" he asked quietly. The traveler lowered his voice. "No one seems to know the whole truth. Some say ambitious leaders are competing for power. Others whisper that ancient promises have been forgotten. But everyone agrees on one thing. Silver Ridge is no longer the strong pack it once was." The name settled heavily inside the quiet cabin. Evelyn remained still, though memories she had buried years ago stirred beneath the calm expression on her face. She had promised herself never to look back, yet hearing those familiar words awakened emotions she believed time had erased. The traveler continued. "The Alpha King has called for every promising young alpha across the northern territories to gather before the harvest moon. He believes the next generation must stand together before the kingdom grows weaker." Ethan listened carefully from the corner of the room. Noah noticed the concern hidden behind the traveler's tired eyes. Lucas quietly placed another piece of bread into the man's hands before he continued his journey. Mason stepped outside to secure the horse against the evening wind, while Caleb thanked the stranger for sharing news from beyond the mountains. Long after the traveler disappeared down the trail, silence settled over the cabin once again. Rowan carefully rolled up the map. "The world is calling," he said softly. Evelyn looked toward the window where distant peaks glowed beneath the fading sunset. "I hoped we would have more time," she admitted. That evening the brothers gathered outside beneath a sky filled with bright stars. None of them fully understood why the conversation inside had felt different, yet each sensed an invisible thread pulling toward a place they had never seen. Ethan finally spoke. "If people are suffering, should we not help?" Evelyn stepped onto the porch, wrapping a warm shawl around her shoulders. She watched her sons standing together beneath the moonlight, taller now than she sometimes remembered. They carried quiet confidence instead of pride, compassion instead of arrogance, exactly as she had prayed they would. She walked toward them and gently rested a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Helping others is never the wrong choice," she said. "But sometimes returning to the place that hurt you requires more courage than leaving it behind." None of the boys asked what she meant. Somehow they understood that the answer belonged to a story their mother had never been ready to tell. Far beyond the hidden valley, a lone wolf lifted its voice beneath the rising moon. The haunting call carried for miles by the autumn wind until it reached the mountains where Evelyn closed her eyes in quiet recognition. The past had finally found its way back, and for the first time in 10 years, she realized that the road leading home had already begun to open before them. The journey back began. Before sunrise beneath a sky painted with soft shades of blue and gold. The hidden valley that had sheltered Evelyn for 10 peaceful years slowly disappeared behind them as the wagon rolled down the narrow mountain trail. Rowan stood outside the cabin, leaning gently on his walking staff, his silver hair dancing in the cool morning breeze. He smiled with quiet pride rather than sadness. "Remember," he called after them, "the greatest hearts never need to prove how strong they are." Ethan nodded respectfully. Noah tipped his hat. Lucas promised they would return. Mason waved with the enthusiasm of youth, while Caleb ran back one last time to embrace the old healer who had become the grandfather they had never known. Evelyn watched the farewell with grateful eyes before guiding the horses toward the distant kingdom she had once sworn never to see again. As the days passed, the familiar landscape slowly returned. Rivers she had crossed as a frightened young woman still flowed through the valleys. Ancient forests still whispered beneath the wind. Stone bridges remained unchanged despite the passing years. Yet everything somehow felt smaller than the memories she had carried. The boys noticed people watching them wherever they stopped. Merchants smiled politely. Children followed them through busy marketplaces. Even experienced travelers seemed strangely unsettled whenever all 5 brothers stood together. Their presence carried an invisible confidence that could not be explained. It was not arrogance. It was something quieter, something ancient that seemed to awaken respect before a single word had been spoken. On the 5th afternoon, the towers of Silver Ridge finally appeared beyond rolling hills covered in autumn colors. Evelyn stopped the wagon at the crest of a hill. The village looked both familiar and distant, like a forgotten dream returning with the morning light. For several moments, she simply stared at the stone gates where her old life had ended beneath a winter moon. Caleb gently touched her hand. "Mother," he asked softly, "is this where you grew up?" Evelyn smiled with calm honesty. "Yes." Lucas studied her face. "Does it still hurt?" She looked toward the valley before answering. "Not the way it once did." Ethan stepped forward, his voice steady beyond his years. "Then we will walk beside you." Together, they continued toward the entrance. The marketplace outside the gates overflowed with visitors answering the Alpha King's call. Young warriors from neighboring packs filled the streets, proudly displaying their family colors while elders welcomed arriving guests. Conversations drifted through the crisp afternoon air until the moment Evelyn and her sons crossed beneath the ancient archway. One by one, voices faded into silence. Shopkeepers stopped arranging their goods. Travelers paused in the middle of busy streets. Horses unexpectedly lowered their heads. No one understood why the atmosphere had changed so suddenly. They simply felt it. 5 young men walked beside an ordinary woman with quiet dignity, yet something about them commanded attention without asking for it. An elderly guard narrowed his eyes, studying the brothers with growing confusion. "What pack do you belong to?" he asked respectfully. Ethan glanced toward his mother before answering exactly as she had taught him. "We belong wherever people need kindness." The guard blinked, unable to explain why those simple words carried unexpected weight. High above the marketplace, inside the stone council hall overlooking the village, Alpha King Cale Ashford stood beside an open window, discussing preparations for the gathering. Without warning, he fell completely silent. A strange feeling passed through him like the first breath of winter. He slowly turned toward the crowded streets below, unable to see the faces hidden among the gathering visitors. Yet his instincts whispered that someone long forgotten had just returned, bringing with them a destiny powerful enough to change everything the kingdom believed about its past. Morning sunlight poured through the towering windows of the council hall as representatives from every northern pack gathered beneath banners that had hung there for generations. Conversations filled the chamber until the great doors opened once again. Evelyn entered quietly with her 5 sons walking beside her, dressed simply despite the attention that immediately followed them. She had not come seeking recognition. She had come because helping others mattered more than protecting old wounds. Yet the moment the brothers stepped into the hall, a strange stillness spread across the room. Seasoned alphas who had spent decades leading powerful packs exchanged uncertain glances without understanding why their instincts suddenly urged respect instead of competition. Ethan carried himself with calm confidence. Noah observed every detail with thoughtful eyes. Lucas greeted unfamiliar faces with genuine kindness. Mason smiled easily despite the tension surrounding them, and Caleb quietly noticed an elderly servant struggling to carry a heavy tray before stepping forward to help without being asked. His simple act of kindness drew grateful smiles from people who had never met him. Across the chamber, Alpha King Kale Ashford paused in the middle of welcoming another delegation. His silver eyes settled upon the 5 young men, and an unfamiliar feeling tightened inside his chest. It was not fear. It was recognition without memory, as though an invisible thread had stretched across years of silence and gently called his attention toward them. He could not explain why their presence felt strangely familiar, only that every instinct he possessed refused to look away. His closest advisor leaned toward him. "Your Majesty, is something wrong?" Kale answered without moving his eyes. "No, but something important has just arrived." Meanwhile, several respected elders quietly approached Evelyn. Most failed to recognize the young Omega they had once watched leave beneath a winter sky. Time had softened her sadness into quiet confidence. One elderly woman studied her face for several moments before suddenly covering her mouth in disbelief. "Evelyn," she whispered. The name spread softly through nearby conversations like a forgotten melody. Curious faces turned toward her. A few remembered the trial from years ago. Others only knew fragments of old rumors that no one had questioned at the time. Evelyn bowed politely without bitterness. "It has been many years," she said simply, before anyone could ask. Another question, a young child wandering through the crowded hall stumbled near the stone steps. Lucas reached the child first, gently helping him stand while Caleb brushed the dust from the little boy's coat. The frightened child smiled almost instantly, and his anxious mother thanked the brothers with tears in her eyes. Around them, people quietly noticed something unexpected. Every action the 5 young men took reflected patience, humility, and kindness instead of pride. Their strength never demanded attention. It simply appeared wherever it was needed. Kale watched every moment from across the hall, and with each passing minute the strange feeling inside him grew stronger. Then Ethan turned slightly, and for the briefest instant sunlight caught his eyes. The same clear silver that stared back at Kale from every mirror each morning. The Alpha King drew a slow breath, unable to explain why the resemblance unsettled him so deeply. His hand instinctively rested above his own heart as a faint warmth spread through his chest, the ancient bond of the moon stirring after years of complete silence. Somewhere deep within his spirit, a forgotten promise had awakened. While hidden beneath the polished stone floor of the council hall, ancient runes carved centuries earlier began to glow with a soft silver light that no one had seen in generations. The silver light beneath the council hall floor faded as quietly as it had appeared, leaving the gathering uncertain whether they had truly witnessed anything at all. Yet Alpha King Kale Ashford could not dismiss the feeling growing stronger inside him. Throughout the morning his gaze returned again and again to Evelyn and the 5 young men beside her. Every instinct sharpened with each passing moment, not because he sensed danger, but because something within his soul refused to accept coincidence. During the midday assembly, the kingdom's chief historian stepped forward carrying an ancient leather-bound record reserved for matters of royal lineage and forgotten law. He cleared his throat before addressing the council. "Many have asked why the moon runes awakened today. The last recorded occurrence happened more than 3 centuries ago." Curious murmurs spread across the chamber. The elderly historian carefully opened the weathered pages. "According to our oldest records, the runes answer only when bloodlines separated by injustice are brought together again beneath one roof." Silence followed his words. Kale slowly rose from his seat. His calm expression revealed little, but inside his thoughts raced through memories he had not revisited in years. He remembered a frightened young Omega standing alone beneath the blood moon. He remembered accepting the council's judgment without demanding proof. At the time, he had believed preserving order meant trusting the elders. For the first time, doubt quietly entered his heart. Before he could speak, another voice interrupted the assembly. Your Majesty. The speaker was Cedric Holloway, the former Beta advisor who had retired from public duties years earlier, yet still held influence among several respected families. His polished smile never reached his eyes. Old stories often awaken unnecessary emotions. Surely we should remain focused on the challenges facing the kingdom rather than reopening ancient misunderstandings. His words sounded reasonable, yet Noah immediately noticed something unusual. Cedric never looked directly at Evelyn. Instead, he carefully avoided meeting her eyes. Noah leaned closer to Ethan and whispered, "He is afraid." Ethan remained calm. Of mother? Noah slowly shook his head. Of the truth. Across the hall, Evelyn recognized Cedric instantly. 10 years had changed his hair, but not the calculating expression she remembered from the night her life had fallen apart. She said nothing. Rowan had once taught her that truth did not need to shout in order to be heard. It only needed time. As the council meeting concluded, Cale approached Evelyn for the first time. The room quietly watched as the Alpha King stopped only a few feet away. For several long seconds, neither of them spoke. Finally, Cale inclined his head with genuine respect. "Welcome back to Silver Ridge." Evelyn returned the gesture politely. "Thank you, Your Majesty." His eyes briefly moved toward the 5 young men standing beside her. "You have raised remarkable sons." A gentle smile touched Evelyn's face. "I only taught them to choose kindness whenever strength gave them another option." Those simple words struck Cale more deeply than he expected. They carried no resentment, no bitterness, only quiet dignity. Before he could continue, a royal messenger hurried into the hall carrying a sealed parchment marked with the crest of the Border Watch. He bowed quickly before the king. "Your Majesty, scouts have returned with urgent news. A large group of displaced families is approaching the eastern border seeking shelter before the coming winter. They have nowhere else to go." Without hesitation, Ethan stepped forward. "Then we should welcome them." Lucas nodded immediately. "No child should fear the cold." Caleb added softly, "A kingdom grows stronger every time it chooses compassion." The hall fell silent once more. Cale looked from the brothers to Evelyn, and for the first time in many years he wondered whether the greatest leaders standing before him had never worn crowns at all, while Cedric quietly tightened his hands behind his back, realizing that every act of kindness was bringing the kingdom one step closer to uncovering the secret he had hidden for an entire decade. The eastern gates opened before sunrise as wagons carrying weary families slowly entered Silver Ridge under the watch of the Royal Guard. Mothers held sleepy children close while elderly travelers leaned gratefully upon walking sticks after weeks of difficult roads. Before the council could organize assistance, Evelyn and her sons quietly stepped forward. Ethan directed arriving wagons toward open shelters with calm confidence. Noah organized supplies, so every family received blankets before the evening chill arrived. Lucas comforted frightened children with gentle words that quickly replaced tears with shy smiles. Mason worked beside the village craftsman, repairing broken wagon wheels without asking for recognition, while Caleb carried baskets of fresh bread from the kitchens until every table was filled. The people of Silver Ridge watched in growing admiration. These 5 young men possessed the quiet authority of natural leaders. Yet none of them acted as though serving others was beneath them. Their example spread through the village until merchants donated food, healers volunteered their time, and neighbors welcomed strangers into their own homes. Standing on the balcony overlooking the square, Cale observed everything in thoughtful silence. Beside him, the chief historian approached carrying another collection of ancient records recently recovered from the royal archives. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "while searching for references to the moon runes, I found something unexpected." Cale accepted the weathered documents. Among faded reports from 10 years earlier rested several witness statements concerning Evelyn's banishment. As he read each page, his expression slowly changed. The accusations repeated throughout the records contained no verified evidence, only anonymous claims and recommendations signed by one official advisor. Every trail led back to a single name: Cedric Holloway. Cale closed the file with deliberate care. "Summon him," he ordered quietly. A short time later, Cedric entered the council chamber with the same composed smile he had worn for years. "You wish to see me, Your Majesty?" Cale placed the old records across the table. Explain why every testimony against Evelyn Carter depended upon your investigation alone. For the first time, Cedric hesitated. The council trusted my judgment. Cale's steady gaze never left him. That is not what I asked. The room fell silent. Several surviving elders carefully reread the documents before exchanging uneasy glances. One elderly council member slowly stood. I remember requesting additional witnesses, she admitted softly. They never arrived. Another elder frowned while studying the signatures. These approval marks, they were added after the meeting. Cedric's confidence began to fade. His carefully constructed story, accepted without question for an entire decade, was quietly unraveling beneath simple facts. Outside, unaware of the discussion unfolding inside the council hall, Evelyn sat beside one of the refugee children, helping the little girl braid colorful ribbons into her hair. Caleb laughed nearby while teaching younger children a simple game using smooth river stones. Ethan noticed Cale watching them from the balcony above. Instead of looking away, he offered the Alpha King a respectful nod. Cale returned the gesture almost instinctively. In that brief exchange, he recognized something that no document could ever record. Character. It could not be invented, purchased, or borrowed. It was built through countless ordinary choices made when no reward was expected. As evening settled across Silver Ridge, the council bell rang throughout the village, calling every elder, every pack representative, and every witness back to the Great Hall. The ancient records had reopened a forgotten chapter, and before another sunrise arrived, the kingdom would finally learn that the greatest mistake made 10 years earlier had never been the banishment of one innocent Omega, but the decision to believe a convenient lie instead of searching for the truth. The Great Hall overflowed long before the council bell finished echoing across Silver Ridge. Elders, pack leaders, villagers, and the newly arrived refugee families stood shoulder to shoulder beneath the ancient banners, waiting as the truth that had slept for 10 years prepared to awaken. At the center of the chamber, Alpha King Cale Ashford stood beside the council table where every recovered record had been carefully arranged for all to see. His voice remained calm, but every word carried unmistakable weight. Today we are not gathered to protect pride. We are gathered to protect truth. The chief historian presented each document in order, explaining how witness statements had been altered, signatures added after official meetings had ended, and accusations accepted without evidence. One by one, the surviving elders confirmed what they now remembered, questions that had never been answered, witnesses who had never appeared, doubts that had been quietly dismissed. Every path led back to Cedric Holloway. The former advisor lowered his head as silence filled the chamber. There were no angry voices, only the heavy realization that an innocent life had been changed because too many people had accepted certainty without seeking honesty. Cale slowly walked toward Evelyn. 10 years earlier, he had watched her leave through the same gates without asking the question that should have mattered most. Today he refused to repeat that mistake. Before the entire kingdom, the Alpha King bowed his head. The hall fell completely silent. Evelyn Carter, he said with sincere humility, the exile should have been mine, not yours. I failed to protect justice when you needed it most, and for that I ask your forgiveness, not because I deserve it, but because truth deserves to be spoken. Many in the crowd lowered their own heads as emotion quietly spread through the room. Evelyn looked at the man before her, then at the countless faces surrounding them. Some had judged her. Some had forgotten her. Others had never known her story until this day. She took a slow breath before answering with the same quiet strength that had carried her through every lonely year. Forgiveness does not erase the past, she said gently, but it allows the future to become something better. Tears filled more than a few eyes. Ethan, Noah, Lucas, Mason, and Caleb exchanged proud smiles, recognizing the lesson their mother had taught them since childhood now unfolding before an entire kingdom. Cale turned toward the 5 young men, his silver eyes reflecting unmistakable warmth. You have honored this kingdom before ever belonging to it. The moon runes beneath the great hall began glowing once more, brighter than before, their silver light spreading gently across the polished stone floor. The chief historian smiled through quiet amazement. The ancient blessing has completed itself, he whispered. Justice has returned where injustice once stood. Outside, as evening settled beneath a clear autumn sky, The entire village gathered in the central square. There were no grand celebrations of victory, only neighbors sharing food, children laughing together, and families once separated by fear now sitting side by side. Evelyn stood beneath the rising moon with her 5 sons surrounding her. Kale joined them, not ahead of them, but beside them. Above the rooftops, 5 white wolves appeared briefly along the distant ridgeline before, disappearing into the peaceful forest, their silent presence almost like a blessing carried upon the night wind. Evelyn looked at the stars and smiled, remembering the frightened young Omega who had once walked into a snowstorm believing she had lost everything. She finally understood that the moon had never abandoned her. It had simply led her through the longest road, so she could return not seeking revenge, but carrying 5 sons whose greatest strength was never that they were alphas. It was that they had learned from their mother that kindness is the only power capable of changing both hearts and history.